Trump has really changed up his tune when it comes to women and abortion. I wonder why. Maybe it's because a new Reuters Ipsos poll shows Harris with a growing lead among women. The latest poll shows Harris leading Trump 49 to 36% by 13 points. As a reminder, it wasn't long ago Trump was talking about abortion like this. Let's watch.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form.
He's also known to brag about the overturning of Roe versus Wade.
For 54 years, they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it, and I'm proud to have done it.
So it makes sense for Americans to do a double take when they heard Trump say this about IVF.
IVF has been an issue that has become political. Yeah. A lot of people talking about it. What's the Trump administration going to do when it comes to IVF if you get elected?
Right. Well, as you know, I was always for IVF right from the beginning. As soon as we heard about it, it's fertilization and it's helping women and men and families, but it's helping women able to have a baby. Some have great difficulty, and a lot of them have been very happy with the results, as you know, and what we're doing. And we're doing this because we just think it's great, and we need great children, beautiful children in our country. We actually need them. And we are going to be, under the Trump administration, we are going to be paying for that treatment. So we are paying for that treatment.
All Americans who want it?
For all Americans that get it, all Americans that need it. So we're going to be paying for that treatment. Or we're going to be mandating that the insurance company pay.
Meanwhile, Trump's running mate J.D. Vance was pressed by CNN's John Berman on Trump's inconsistent abortion stance. Let's watch.
You say he's been consistent, but of course there was a period in Donald Trump's life where he was not anti-abortion. Then he became anti-abortion, at one point suggesting that women should be punished if they have an abortion. Now he's saying he's for more than 6 weeks, but it's not clear how he's going to vote in an amendment in his own state. So that's why I think people are seeking clarity. You can understand that.
Well, John, the Dobbs decision, what it fundamentally did is this goes back to Democratic legislatures and the people, of course, who elect those legislatures. I think the president has said in a post-Roe, a post-Dobbs world, he wants voters to make these decisions. I think it's important to remember, of course, that Kamala Harris has come out for taxpayer-funded abortion.
Sorry, Senator, but he's a voter in this case. The reason it matters,
I just wanted to finish this point.
Is he's a voter. Go ahead.
Well, of course it matters what his position is, and I'm sure that he's going to say what his position ultimately is, John.
You say he's been consistent, but of course there was a period in Donald Trump's life where he was not anti-abortion. Then he became anti-abortion, at one point suggesting that women should be punished if they have an abortion. Now he's saying he's for more than 6 weeks, but it's not clear how he's going to vote in an amendment in his own state. So that's why I think people are seeking clarity. You can understand that.
Well, John, the Dobbs decision, what it fundamentally did is this goes back to Democratic legislatures and the people, of course, who elect those legislatures. I think the president has said in a post-Roe, a post-Dobbs world, he wants voters to make these decisions. I think it's important to remember, of course, that Kamala Harris has come out for taxpayer-funded abortion.
Sorry, Senator, but he's a voter in this case. The reason it matters,
John, I just wanted to finish this point.
Is he's a voter. Go ahead.
Well, of course it matters what his position is, and I'm sure that he's going to say what his position ultimately is, John.
In another push to appeal to women voters, Trump is scheduled to be a keynote speaker at the 3rd annual Moms for Liberty Summit. The group is a national nonprofit that has spearheaded efforts to get LGBTQ+ and structural racism content out of K through 12 classrooms. So we'll see if that's enough to woo the women. But I do think Trump is the kind of guy who's a true populist who sees that something he's pushed is something that could threaten his election efforts because it's unpopular. And he's like, well, I changed my mind on it. It makes it really hard for someone like J.D. Vance, who hasn't been like that as much as Trump has, flippant on the issues from one interview to the next, to have to answer for Trump. J.D. Vance is in a tough position.
Well, I mean, Trump has changed his mind over time. He was a former Democrat, obviously, but I don't see. Well, I mean, he is not running on abortion restrictions at the national level. I agree that Dobbs was about turning the decision back to the state. That's populism that's letting the people decide. And in state after state, the people have decided that they don't want very strict restrictions on abortion. Maybe some restrictions would be fine. Donald Trump himself said restrictions coming in at 6 weeks was far too early. You know, European nations, many of them, like France, have restrictions getting in at 12, 14 weeks, that range. If that's what people decide in the states, that seems perfectly reasonable to me. If different states put it earlier or later, they can do that, and you have to make the argument. But in terms of a federal policy, he's been very clear that there shouldn't be one. And yeah, he's talking about all sorts of, some socially liberal ideas that I actually like him coming out and saying marijuana should be decriminalized, not that you should, be smoking it in the streets because the smell bothers a lot of people, but that, in your house, private marijuana use should just absolutely not be a crime at all. That was very nice to hear from the president. And, he's coming out in support of things like IVF at a time where Tim Walz was trying to confuse everyone into thinking that he had gone through it when he'd gone through a completely different proceeding. Now, I don't know that I'm not for government subsidizing things, but I'm certainly for having those things be options for families and getting regulatory hurdles out of the way for people to, plan their own families and all that kind of stuff. That's what Trump's running on. So this idea that he could be tarred as some kind of abortion extremist is, I think, just not working, not going to work.
Well, I don't think it's extremist what Tim Walz has done by, it's IUF, not IVF. He calls it IVF because colloquially that's the term that's used. This is something that Democrats have vowed to protect for a long time. Trump coming out and saying everyone's going to get free IVF. I'd like to know how. It seems good to want to give Americans health care like every other modern nation does, but that's not something Trump wants to do. So is it just IVF that he's offering to people? Some Republicans, there are 2 Republicans in Congress that have already split from Trump over this. And then you have Tom Cotton saying, we're open to Trump's IVF proposal. This kind of, populist right that's fueled by a lot of evangelical Christians who don't see IVF as something that is good. A lot of Catholics as well. They see this as something that is killing embryos, which they believe have a right to life, by fertilizing eggs and then discarding them if they are not selected as the eggs that will be implanted in a uterus. That is an illegal abortion in some states. And so this is going to be an issue that I think divides Republicans, because they've put themselves in a position of saying, we don't want abortion. Many states have a 6-week ban. And there's no exceptions for rape or incest in many of these states. And that's not been popular among women. So Trump immediately changing his position, he doesn't have the party in lockstep coming with him, because a lot of the party are those state representatives and those Congress people that have advocated for those early bans that are incredibly unpopular. And so they've really have dug themselves into quite a ditch here with this issue that I think Trump can climb out of, but he might leave a lot of the Republican Party and some of his voting base behind.
We'll be back with more Rising right after this.